Inner Whirlwinds, Change Your Inside, Change Your Life. Written by Ronnie Rowland. Published by Growth Literacy Lounge. They say you can't judge a book by its cover. But we often judge our lives by exactly that, the visible, the external, the curated surface. Success. Appearance. Status. Approval. We chase these like polished stones, hoping they'll make us feel whole. But sooner or later, the illusion cracks. The job doesn't fulfill. The relationship doesn't heal. The achievement doesn't quite achieve the ache. Because the real story was never written out there. It was always unfolding in here. Imagine your life as a house. From the outside it gleams. But walk through the front door, and you might find cluttered thoughts, leaking emotions, unspoken grief, and outdated beliefs. No matter how much you paint the porch, if the foundation beneath is fractured, it won't hold. This book is about that foundation, your inner world. You'll find no empty positivity here. No mantras on autopilot. Instead, we'll uncover the quiet mechanics of transformation. The subtle shifts that change everything. Because the greatest victories happen long before anyone else sees them. As psychologist Carl Jung once said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. You're not here to fake peace. You're here to grow it. These pages are an invitation. To tend the soil of your thoughts. To weed out what no longer serves. To plant what lasts. Because when your inner world wins, life doesn't just look different, it feels different. And that's the kind of change that doesn't wash away with the weather. Chapter 1: The Garden Within. There's a reason the most ancient wisdom traditions speak in gardens. Eden. Paradise. Fields of lilies. Even the mind, in modern psychology, is called fertile ground. That's no accident. Because the human inner world behaves like a garden, alive, responsive, and quietly ruling over everything it touches. Most people live from the outside in. They wait for good weather to feel good. They rely on compliments to feel worthy. They chase success, hoping it will plant confidence. But the garden doesn't work that way. The soil never asks the sky if it's worthy of growing. It simply receives, nurtures, and multiplies whatever is sown. Imagine two gardens side by side. One is carefully tended, weeded, watered, and watched over. The other is ignored, left to grow wild. Given enough time, both will be full. One with fruit. The other with thorns. That's the truth of the inner world. Growth is inevitable, but direction is a choice. Many carry toxic roots without knowing it. A childhood moment misunderstood. A voice of criticism that became internal law. A single failure that rewrote their sense of worth. Over time, these hidden roots shape how we see, speak, love, and lead. And the danger isn't just in the pain, they're invisible. Subterranean. But their fruit is plain: anxiety, resentment, insecurity, control. What you believe deep down will always bloom in how you live. A woman once described her thoughts as background noise. But that noise? It steers every decision. Neuroscience agrees. Studies show that 90% of our decisions are subconscious, meaning your internal world is making choices before your logic ever shows up. That means tending the garden within isn't self-help. It's survival. This doesn't mean perfection. Gardens aren't sterile. They're messy, seasonal, and subject to storms. But they're also persistent. With attention and care, even the most neglected ground can be revived. The key is noticing. What am I watering? What am I believing? What am I allowing to take root? Curiosity is the new cultivation. Start here. When someone criticizes you, what story rises first? When you fail, what do you tell yourself it means? Those quiet answers are seeds. Not facts, seeds. Asterisk, and the longer they go unchallenged, the deeper they embed. You don't need to be an expert gardener to begin. You need to be willing. Willing to pull the weeds of comparison. Willing to replace the thorns of self-doubt with truth. Willing to sit with discomfort long enough to see what it's really trying to say. Because even pain has roots, and often, it's pointing to something that wants to heal. Transformation is never cosmetic. It's cellular. It starts below the surface, where no one sees. But when the inner world begins to change, the outer world follows like a shadow. This is why the soil matters. A storm can level buildings, but it can't uproot something deeply planted. A compliment may lift you, but it can't anchor you. That's the job of the roots, your self-awareness, your beliefs, your quiet, repeated choices. And when those roots are strong, life doesn't have to be perfect to be meaningful. You were not born with thorns. They grew. Which means new things can grow too. You can choose what takes root from here. Because winning inside isn't loud. It's not flashy. But it changes everything. Your inner world is like a garden. Whatever you nurture will grow. Inner transformation begins by becoming aware of unconscious beliefs. Lasting change comes from the inside out, not the outside in. What beliefs or patterns have taken root in your life without your permission? Today, pause 3 times to observe your self-talk. Is it helping something grow, or quietly pulling you under? Chapter 2: The Stories We Tell Ourselves. If the inner world is a garden, then your thoughts are the seeds, but your stories are the climate. They determine the conditions in which everything grows. You don't see the world as it is. You see it as you are, and at the heart of that filter are the stories you've rehearsed so often, they've begun to feel like truth. I'm always overlooked. I'm not ready. People like me never make it. These aren't facts. They're narratives, quiet scripts shaping perception and directing behavior without permission. Stories begin early. A missed hug becomes proof of being unwanted. A teacher's sharp word hardens into a lifelong belief. Over time, isolated moments string together like beads, becoming a thread you wear through life. Each new experience doesn't stand alone, it's filtered through that old thread, reinforcing the same storyline. 2 people can face the same challenge and respond in completely different ways. One sees failure as evidence of inadequacy. The other sees it as feedback. One spirals. The other recalibrates. The difference isn't intelligence, talent, or luck. It's the story behind the moment. The meaning assigned to it. Your brain, in its brilliance, loves patterns. It's constantly trying to make sense of your world by connecting the dots. But it doesn't always get it right. It prefers consistency over truth, which means if you've carried a false story long enough, your mind will keep bending reality to support it. This is where transformation begins, not in erasing the past, but in retelling it. Because while you can't control what happened, you can choose what it means. Consider the story of a man who was rejected by multiple publishers before becoming one of the best-selling authors of all time. Had he accepted the story that he wasn't good enough, the world would never have known Harry Potter. But J.K. Rowling chose a different story, not that rejection equals failure, but that rejection is a gate, not a verdict. The stories you tell yourself are not set in stone. They are clay, moldable, shapeable, waiting to be reworked. Rewriting them doesn't mean denial. It means honest revision. Naming what hurt. Validating what's real. Then asking, is there a kinder, truer version of this story? One that moves me forward instead of holding me back? Try this. The next time you catch yourself spiraling, pause and ask, what story am I telling myself right now? That question alone interrupts the automatic script. It creates space. And in that space, new possibilities can breathe. The inner critic doesn't just want to punish. It wants to protect. It shouts to keep you from risk. But what if you listen not to the volume of the voice, but to the need beneath it? Often, fear is just the story that hasn't been understood yet. Language has power. Neuroscientists have found that the way we describe our experiences changes how we feel them. A setback described as a lesson feels different than one labeled failure. Your words shape your world, inside and out. So speak with care. Not just to others, but to yourself. Choose stories that carry truth, compassion, and strength. Stories that stretch toward the person you're becoming. Because the most powerful narrative you'll ever live is the one you whisper when no one else is listening. Your mind runs on stories, many of which are invisible and inherited. You have the power to challenge and rewrite the narratives that limit you. Transformation begins when you question the meaning behind your thoughts. What story do you often repeat to yourself, and is it still serving you? Today, when a negative thought arises, ask, what else could this mean? Then write a new, truer version of the story. Chapter 3: Emotional Weeds and Thought Seeds. In every garden, something grows, whether planted with intention or left to chance. Some sprout sweet and nourishing. Others invade silently, winding their way through the roots until they choke the life from everything else. The same is true in the soil of your inner world. Thoughts are seeds. Emotions are evidence of what's taken root. Most people try to manage their emotions like unruly guests, suppress them, distract from them, or pretend they didn't show up. But emotions are not enemies. They are messengers. Each feeling is a signal, pointing not just to an event, but to a belief beneath the surface. Anger may be protecting unacknowledged hurt. Envy may be exposing unmet desire. Fear often guards unhealed wounds. Ignoring emotions doesn't uproot them. It buries them deeper. And what's buried still grows. Consider this. A man repeatedly finds himself overreacting at work, snapping at colleagues, boiling with resentment over small corrections. On the surface, he blames stress. But beneath, an old belief is alive: I'm never good enough. Each interaction becomes soil for that seed to thrive. Until he names the root, no strategy will last. Because you can't heal what you won't feel, and you can't change what you won't name. Awareness is the beginning of transformation. It's the gardener's trowel, the tool that brings roots to light. Once you identify the thought behind the feeling, you have a choice: keep it, or plant something new. Thoughts become emotional habits. Left unchecked, they harden into reflexes. But with attention, they can be softened, reshaped, replaced. Gratitude, for example, is a thought seed with profound emotional consequence. Studies show that daily gratitude rewires the brain, lowering cortisol, increasing resilience, and expanding empathy. It's not fluff, it's fertilizer for peace. But replacing a weeded thought isn't about slapping positivity over pain. That's synthetic soil. Real transformation begins when you sit with what's true, sift through what no longer serves, and then choose to plant something honest, empowering, and alive. Try this. When a difficult emotion rises, instead of escaping it, follow it. Ask, what belief is feeding this? Where did it begin? Don't judge the answer. Witness it. That simple act of noticing loosens the root. Think of a child handed a dandelion. To them, it's a flower. To a gardener, it's a weed. What makes the difference? Context. The same is true of your thoughts. Some you've nurtured out of habit, or because you didn't know there were other seeds to choose from. Now you do. Healing isn't about perfect soil. It's about consistent tending. Each moment of awareness is a pull at the root. Each new thought chosen with care is a seed planted in fertile ground. Over time, those choices bloom into emotional stability, clarity, and strength, not because life gets easier, but because your inner garden grows wiser. Even the healthiest gardens need maintenance. Weeds will show up. Old beliefs may resurface. But now you know what to do with them. You don't panic. You prune. You pull. You plant again. Because emotional freedom doesn't come from avoiding weeds. It comes from knowing how to handle them when they appear. Emotions reveal the thoughts and beliefs taking root in your inner world. Awareness is the first step in pulling emotional weeds and planting better thoughts. Daily thought patterns, like gratitude, can recondition emotional responses over time. What recurring emotion keeps surfacing in your life, and what belief might be feeding it? Today, when you feel a strong emotion, pause and ask, what thought or belief is underneath this feeling? Write it down. No judgment, just observe. Chapter 4: The Power of Inner Language. The words we speak to ourselves don't echo, they embed. Like steady drops of water, they carve patterns deep into the mind's terrain. Over time, those patterns become default pathways, shaping how we think, feel, and respond without ever asking permission. Language is more than communication. It's construction. Every word carries weight, and in the inner world, that weight can build or bury. Thoughts framed in language are the architecture of identity. I'm so stupid. I always mess things up. No one listens to me. These aren't passing thoughts. They're blueprints. And the life you live rises according to their design. Research confirms what ancient wisdom long suspected: your brain listens to your words and believes them. Studies in neuroplasticity show that repeated phrases, even internal ones, physically alter the brain's neural wiring. Like ruts carved into soil by a wagon wheel, these internal scripts become the routes your thoughts travel most often. This is why inner language matters. You are always narrating your life to yourself. And that narration is not neutral. It is either lifting you toward clarity or dragging you into confusion. Consider a runner approaching a steep hill. One voice says, "I can't do this." Another whispers, "This is hard, but I've climbed before." Same hill. Different outcome. Not because of muscle, but meaning. And meaning is shaped by language. The most dangerous phrases are often subtle. "That's just who I am. Nothing ever works out. I knew I'd ruin it." Spoken with a sigh, offered as fact, but these are not facts. They are forecasts. And forecasts have power. Speak rain long enough, and you'll stop planting anything at all. The key is not to shame your words, but to become aware of them. What tone do you take with yourself when you fail? What phrases circle your mind when no one's listening? These aren't harmless. They're seeds. And as we've seen, every seed grows something. But change doesn't come through forced affirmations or hollow mantras. It comes through intentional, believable shifts. Instead of "I'm a failure," try "I didn't get it right this time, but I can learn." Instead of "I can't do this," try "I haven't done this yet." The difference is subtle. But the brain registers it. Hope opens. Possibility flickers. A new path begins. There's a scene in Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning where he observes fellow prisoners in a concentration camp. Amid unthinkable suffering, some gave up. Others found strength in meaning, in memory, in love. The common thread wasn't their condition. It was their inner language, the story they told themselves about their experience. Frankl wrote, "Everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances." That choice begins with words. Words can wound. But they can also water. One honest sentence can soften shame. One reframed thought can loosen a lie. Over time, inner language becomes inner posture. And that posture determines how you meet life, whether bowed under the weight of unspoken insults or standing with quiet, earned dignity. You don't have to speak perfectly to speak powerfully. You just have to speak like someone who belongs to the person you're becoming. Because the voice inside becomes the life outside. Speak accordingly. Inner language shapes thought patterns, identity, and emotional response. Subtle shifts in self-talk can create major internal change over time. Believable, compassionate language builds resilience and clarity. What phrase do you say to yourself that needs to be rewritten, and what new version could replace it? Choose one recurring negative phrase you say to yourself. Write a truthful, hopeful alternative, and repeat it aloud today. Chapter 5: The Trigger Mirror. Triggers are teachers dressed as threats. They show up suddenly, often uninvited: an offhand comment, a delayed text, a sideways glance, and something flares inside. The heart races. The chest tightens. Words come faster or fall silent. What feels small on the outside becomes enormous within. But that size has less to do with the moment, and more to do with the meaning beneath it. A trigger is not the cause of pain. It's the spotlight revealing where pain already lives. Think of your inner world like a mirror. When a trigger shatters your calm, it doesn't introduce a flaw, it reflects one. It points to an old wound, a forgotten story, a belief buried but not broken. Most people try to escape these moments, blaming the person or circumstance that set them off. But escape is not healing. It's avoidance. The real work begins when you choose to look into the mirror, not away from it. A man once lashed out at his partner for interrupting him mid-sentence. The comment was casual, even gentle, but it ignited a storm. Later, in quiet reflection, He traced the fire back to a childhood dinner table where his voice was constantly dismissed. The present moment wasn't the problem, it was the echo. That's what triggers do. They don't create pain, they reawaken it. The trigger is the symptom. The root lies deeper. Here's the hidden gift: triggers point the way to transformation. If you follow the trail instead of resisting it, you'll find beliefs asking to be rewritten. I'm not valuable. I'm not safe. I don't matter. These are not truths. They are old survival scripts. But until brought to light, they govern silently. Noticing a trigger doesn't make you weak. It makes you aware. And awareness is a form of strength. It's the pause that breaks the pattern. Start there. The next time something sets you off, don't ask, why did they do that? Ask, what did that awaken in me? Not in judgment. In curiosity. The brain learns best not under pressure, but in safety. Give yourself that safety. Breathe. Observe. Write it down if you need to. Let the heat become insight. Over time, triggers lose their power when they're no longer mistaken for present danger. They become familiar signals, like streetlights blinking yellow, not to panic, but to pay attention. The ancient philosopher Epictetus once said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." But to react differently, you must first understand what you're reacting from. Is it this moment, or another one pretending to wear its face? Your emotional responses aren't moral failures. They are data. And triggers are data points trying to show you where healing is needed. The mirror doesn't lie. But it also doesn't judge. It simply reflects. And when you stop flinching from what it shows, you begin to reclaim your power. Because the goal isn't to never be triggered. The goal is to recognize the reflection, respond with clarity, and use the moment as a doorway, not a dead end. In that way, each trigger becomes a signal, not of weakness, but of where the next wind within is waiting. Triggers reflect unhealed wounds or outdated beliefs, not present-day truths. Responding to triggers with curiosity instead of blame opens space for growth. Awareness transforms emotional reactions into opportunities for healing. What recent moment triggered a strong reaction in you, and what might it be pointing to beneath the surface? When you feel triggered this week, pause. Breathe. Ask yourself, what story just got activated, and is it still true? Chapter 6. Compassion over comparison. Comparison is a silent thief. It doesn't shout or demand. It whispers. It studies the highlight reels of others and questions your behind the scenes. It measures success in inches, beauty in filters, happiness in curated moments. And in doing so, it slowly erodes the roots of self-worth, not by tearing them out, but by starving them of attention. Where comparison grows, compassion withers. Think of the inner world as a garden of identity. Every time you compare yourself to someone else, you shift your gaze away from your own soil. You stop watering what's yours. You begin reaching into someone else's garden, trying to harvest their fruit while ignoring your roots. But gardens don't thrive on imitation. They thrive on presence. Comparison convinces you that life is a race, that someone else's progress is proof of your delay. But growth doesn't happen in a straight line. It unfolds in seasons. A tree that bears no fruit in winter is not broken. It is preparing. And no amount of looking at someone else's summer will make your spring arrive faster. A woman once sat in a circle of high achievers, convinced she didn't belong. Their stories seemed polished. Their goals were bold. She felt small, unfinished. But when she finally spoke her truth, something unexpected happened. The room exhaled. Others nodded. A few cried. Her vulnerability wasn't weakness. It was relief. And in that moment, she discovered the lie comparison had been feeding her, that she was alone in her struggle. Everyone has shadows. But comparison filters the light and hides the mess. It shows you the fruit, not the fight. The finished page, not the editing. The smile, not the nights filled with doubt. What you see in others is often the result of battles you haven't been shown. Compassion, by contrast, opens the lens. It invites you to view others not as benchmarks, but as mirrors. Their success? Evidence of possibility. Their beauty? A reminder that yours can look different and still be real. Their peace? An invitation, not a competition. Compassion doesn't dilute ambition, it grounds it. It says, I can honor your path and still walk mine fully. Neuroscience shows that self-compassion improves emotional resilience and motivation far more than harsh self-criticism. When you speak to yourself with understanding, your brain shifts out of threat mode. Creativity rises. Fear loosens. Courage grows. It's not indulgence. It's strategy. Try this. When the scroll begins, the social feed, the professional wins, the perfect families pause. Instead of asking, why don't I have that? Ask, what part of me needs kindness right now? Asterisk, that single shift reroutes your attention from lack to love. You are not behind. You are becoming. And the path forward isn't paved by proving you're better than anyone. It's cultivated by becoming better to yourself. So speak gently when you fall short. Celebrate when others rise. Trade comparison for curiosity. Replace envy with empathy. And remember, you can't grow from borrowed soil. Because when compassion leads, the garden within begins to flourish, untangled from the lives of others, rooted in the truth of your own becoming. Comparison distracts from growth by shifting focus outward instead of inward. Compassion fosters resilience, creativity, and a healthier inner world. True progress begins when you speak to yourself with the kindness you often give away. When you catch yourself comparing, what might that moment be revealing about your inner needs? Today, when you notice comparison creeping in, pause and name one thing about your own growth you can appreciate, even if it's still in progress. Chapter 7: Curiosity over Judgment. Judgment slams the door. Curiosity opens it. In the inner world, judgment acts like frost. It stiffens growth, freezes motion, and withers new roots before they get a chance to deepen. It comes in fast, often unnoticed. You should have known better. You always do this. What's wrong with you? Asterisk, these aren't just thoughts. They're verdicts. And when we declare guilt without trial, we shut down the very part of us that needs healing. Curiosity, on the other hand, is warmth. It doesn't excuse the misstep, but it stays long enough to understand it. It leans in. It asks without accusing. And in that posture, it invites change instead of demanding it. Imagine a young child learning to walk. They fall again and again. You don't shame them. You don't shout, you should have mastered this by now. You cheer. You encourage. You help them back up. Somewhere along the way, we forget to treat ourselves with the same grace. We begin to confuse failure with identity, mistakes with proof that something's wrong inside. But what if every misstep was a message, not a sentence? A man struggling with procrastination doesn't need harsher deadlines. He needs to understand the fear beneath the delay. A woman who lashes out in frustration doesn't need to be labeled difficult. She needs space to trace the root of that tension. When we replace judgment with curiosity, we shift from blame to understanding, and understanding changes everything. Judgment says, asterisk, that was wrong. Curiosity asks, asterisk, what made that feel necessary? Judgment says, asterisk, you're broken. Curiosity wonders, asterisk, where did the crack begin? It's not softness. It's strategy. Because the brain doesn't open in the face of attack, it defends. But when met with genuine inquiry, it softens. Learning begins. Change becomes possible. Consider how this shift can play out internally. You snap at someone you love. Judgment enters quickly, asterisk, you're toxic. You ruined the moment. Asterisk, curiosity pauses. Asterisk, what were you feeling right before that? What story were you believing in that second? Asterisk, that pause doesn't erase accountability, it deepens it. It allows you to own your actions without shrinking your worth. Shame thrives in judgment. But healing grows in curiosity. There's a story told about a monk who, upon making a mistake during prayer, bowed and whispered, "How human of me," not sarcastically, not bitterly, gently, with full awareness. That's curiosity. It acknowledges the misstep, but doesn't build a prison around it. Instead, it opens a window. And sometimes, that single breath of grace is enough to shift the whole room inside. We've been taught to be suspicious of ourselves, to assume the worst, to expect failure. But curiosity invites a new lens. What if there's more to me than what I've always believed? That's not delusion. That's discovery. Try this. The next time you catch a negative pattern, procrastination, fear, defensiveness, pause and ask, what's trying to protect me here? Often, what looks like sabotage is actually survival in disguise. The inner world changes not when you force it, but when you see it differently. Curiosity is how you begin to see. Because growth is not perfection. It's observation. It's learning to stay with yourself long enough to notice the why behind the what, and choosing compassion in the process. That's how new paths are formed. That's how old wounds are softened. That's how the garden begins to heal. Judgment closes the door to change. Curiosity opens it with compassion. Emotional patterns often make sense when you trace them to their root. Healing begins by asking better questions instead of declaring harsh conclusions. Where have you been judging yourself lately? And what might happen if you met that place with curiosity instead? Today, notice one moment where you react harshly toward yourself. Pause and ask, what's the deeper need behind this reaction? Chapter 8. Anchoring in Truth. Every storm tests the anchor. When life is calm, it's easy to appear grounded. Smiles come easily. Affirmations flow. Plans unfold neatly. But then the winds shift, a loss, a rejection, a moment of uncertainty, and suddenly, the ground beneath feels unstable. In those moments, what holds isn't surface strength. It's what's buried deep. It's truth. Truth is the anchor of the inner world. Not trendy mantras. Not fleeting moods. But steady, rooted, soul-tested truth, the kind that doesn't shake when the weather does. But anchoring in truth requires knowing what truth really is. And that's where many drift. Too often, people build their identity on opinion, memory, or emotion. Someone once called you inadequate, and it stuck. You failed once, and it became who you are. You feel unworthy, so you assume you must be. But feelings are weather. Truth is foundation. You are not every emotion that visits you. You are not the worst thing you've done, or the harshest thing someone said. Truth isn't how you feel on your worst day, it's what remains when the day is over. Anchoring in truth means choosing a deeper reference point. A young man, raised in a house of criticism, grew up believing he was inherently flawed. For years he tried to outrun the voice. Achievement. Approval. Perfection. None of it held. Until one quiet morning, exhausted by striving, he wrote 3 sentences he wanted to believe. I am enough. I am loved. I am allowed to rest. They weren't just hopeful, they were true. And the more he repeated them, the more they held. Truth must be spoken, even when it feels foreign. Especially then. Neuroscience confirms that repetition rewires belief. Speak a truth often enough, even one that feels distant, and the brain begins to adopt it as familiar. Over time, that familiarity becomes comfort. Comfort becomes confidence. Confidence becomes character. Anchoring doesn't stop the waves. But it keeps the vessel from drifting. And here's the paradox. Truth doesn't always feel true at first. When you're soaked in shame, worthiness feels like a lie. When you're used to chaos, peace feels suspicious. But truth isn't defined by comfort. It's defined by alignment. Does it support your wholeness? Does it move you toward growth? Does it free you from fear? If it does, it's truth. And truth heals. Anchoring also requires discernment. Not everything that sounds good is solid. Some phrases are sugar-coated lies. You're perfect just as you are might sound kind, but truth says you are deeply worthy, and still capable of growth. That's firmer ground. That holds when life tests it. Try this. When you're in a moment of confusion or self-doubt, ask, what is true right now, not what you fear. Not what you assume. But what is real. Even a single honest sentence can become a rope to hold on to. You are allowed to outgrow old beliefs. You are allowed to question inherited narratives. You are allowed to trade shaky ground for solid truth. Because in the end, truth is not just an idea, it's a home. And when your inner world anchors there, storms lose their power. Truth is the foundation that steadies you when emotions and circumstances shift. Beliefs rooted in fear, shame, or past wounds must be challenged and replaced with grounded truths. Repetition of truth, spoken or written, can rewire your inner narrative over time. What belief have you been living with that feels familiar, but isn't true? Write down one truth about your worth, identity, or purpose. Speak it aloud each morning for the next 3 days. Notice what shifts. Chapter 9: Quiet Wins, the Daily Practices. Transformation isn't built in grand gestures. It's shaped in the quiet, ordinary choices no one sees. The world often celebrates breakthroughs, the big decisions, the dramatic changes, the viral moments. But in the garden of the inner world, what truly matters is what happens daily. Quiet wins. Invisible progress. The kind of work that doesn't feel urgent, but always proves essential. A plant doesn't grow because of one watering. It grows because of consistent care. Sunlight today. Water tomorrow. Time and attention across seasons. The same is true of your mind, your habits, your soul. Change doesn't come from intensity, it comes from intention repeated. Daily practices are how you build inner strength before you need it. They're the emotional and mental nutrition that sustains you when life gets heavy. And most of them are simple. Often overlooked. But deeply powerful when practiced with presence. One woman began her mornings with a single question. What kind of energy do I want to carry today? She'd sit in silence for 3 minutes, not to escape the day but to meet it on purpose. Over time, her responses shifted, from anxious reaction to anchored intention. The practice didn't change her circumstances. It changed how she showed up within them. The truth is, your mind is always practicing something. Worry. Gratitude. Comparison. Compassion. Whatever pattern you repeat becomes your default. But when you choose your practices, you reclaim your power. You become the one steering, not just surviving. These practices don't need to be complex. In fact, the simpler they are, the more likely they are to stick. A 5-minute journal. A short walk without your phone. A daily question taped to your mirror. Even the habit of pausing before you speak, just to breathe and check your tone, can shift the atmosphere of an entire day. Science backs this up. Studies on neuroplasticity show that consistent mental habits, like reflection, gratitude, and mindfulness, not only reduce stress but reshape the structure of the brain itself. Emotional regulation improves. Focus sharpens. The nervous system settles. What feels small compounds. And that's the magic of quiet wins, they multiply. The key is consistency, not perfection. You will miss days. You will feel resistance. But the goal isn't to perform. The goal is to return. To keep showing up. To keep watering the roots, even when no fruit is visible yet. There's a story of a bamboo plant that doesn't break the surface for 5 years. Underground, it's growing a root system strong enough to support rapid growth later. In the 5th year, it can shoot up 90 feet in just weeks. But it didn't grow in those weeks. It grew in the quiet. The same applies to your inner life. Your peace, your clarity, your resilience, it's not born in crisis. It's built before it. In the small, steady choices you make when nothing seems to be happening. So choose one practice. Start there. Let it be simple. Let it fit your rhythm. And let it remind you that the most meaningful growth rarely announces itself, it emerges from the quiet. Because in the end, the life you want isn't waiting in the next big moment. It's unfolding in the one you choose right now. Lasting inner change comes from consistent daily practices, not dramatic events. Small, repeated habits like mindfulness or journaling rewire the brain over time. Progress is often invisible before it becomes undeniable. Trust the quiet work. What small daily habit could support the version of yourself you're becoming? Pick one 5-minute practice you can commit to this week. Start today, and treat it like watering your inner garden. Chapter 10: Resilience from the Inside Out. Resilience isn't how loudly you bounce back, it's how deeply you're rooted when life bends you. Most think of resilience as toughness, grit, a kind of emotional armor. But real resilience is quieter than that. It doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's the whisper, "I'll try again tomorrow." Picture a tree in a storm. The wind howls, branches whip, leaves scatter. But the tree stands not because it resists the wind, but because its roots run deep. That's the essence of resilience from the inside out. It doesn't avoid pain. It absorbs, adapts, and anchors in something stronger than circumstance. External resilience, grinding through, holding face, forcing control, may work in the short term. But without internal grounding, it eventually cracks. Because storms don't just test your will. They test your wiring. And your wiring is built in the quiet, daily choices of your inner world. Consider a man who loses his job unexpectedly. His outer world shakes. But inside, he's been practicing reflection, speaking truth over himself, staying rooted in purpose beyond position. So the storm hits, yes, but it doesn't define him. He grieves. He recalibrates. He rises, not because of bravado, but because of the foundation he laid when no one was watching. That's the secret of inner resilience. It's built long before it's needed. The strongest people aren't those who feel nothing. They're the ones who feel fully, and keep going. Who let grief move through, but don't let it anchor. Who feel fear, but still choose forward. Their strength isn't in denial. It's in depth. Resilience from the inside out means creating an inner ecosystem that supports you when things fall apart. It's the self-talk that steadies. The truths that tether. The emotional tools that help you breathe when your plans collapse. It's what holds you upright when nothing else can. Science confirms this. Research shows that resilience is less about personality and more about practice. People who cultivate emotional awareness, positive inner dialogue, and purpose-driven thinking recover faster from setbacks. It's not about being born tough. It's about building inner scaffolding brick by brick. There's a Japanese art form called kintsugi, repairing broken pottery with gold, highlighting the cracks instead of hiding them. The flaw becomes part of the beauty. That's what resilience looks like when it's grown inside. Not the absence of damage, but the decision to mend with intention. It's choosing to say, "This didn't break me. It built me differently." Resilience doesn't mean rushing healing. It means trusting that healing will come. It's the decision to keep your heart open after it's been hurt. To keep showing up even when it feels easier to disappear. To stay rooted when everything in you wants to run. And this kind of resilience doesn't depend on whether the world cooperates. It doesn't wait for peace outside to find peace inside. It grows its own garden, no matter the forecast. Try this. When you face a disappointment or setback, pause and ask, "What in me is still standing?" Name it. Honor it. That recognition alone strengthens your roots. Because the storms won't stop. But your roots can go deeper. And when they do, you'll find that you're not just surviving, you're becoming. True resilience is rooted in the inner world, not external toughness. Emotional awareness and daily practices create internal scaffolding for hard times. Strength is not in avoiding pain, but in staying present and anchored through it. What has tested you lately, and what part of you remained unshaken? Write down one belief or truth that held you steady during a past challenge. Revisit it this week as a reminder of your inner strength. Chapter 11: When the Inner World Wins. It doesn't always look like a celebration. There's no confetti, no grand applause, no headline announcing the shift. When the inner world wins, the victory is often silent, felt in the pause before a reaction, the breath before a harsh word, the calm where anxiety once lived. It's the moment you choose peace over proving, compassion over control, presence over panic. Real transformation is rarely dramatic. It's ordinary, subtle, sometimes invisible. But it's in these moments that you realize something fundamental has changed, not out there, but in here. The old story still knocks, but you don't answer. The trigger sparks, but you meet it with breath instead of blame. The comparison tries to creep in, but you return to your lane. These aren't accidents. They're proof. Quiet proof that your inner world is no longer reacting by default. It's responding with design. You've done more than read words. You've practiced presence. You've pulled weeds, planted truth, and watched new roots form beneath the surface. And now, without forcing it, your life begins to reflect that work. Not perfectly. Not permanently. But undeniably. You speak to yourself with greater care. You see others with more softness. You no longer chase every urgent emotion or believe every fear disguised as fact. You've come home to yourself, not as a project to fix, but as a place to tend. This is the win. It's the woman who no longer apologizes for existing. The man who feels anger and doesn't become it. The teenager who rewrites a story of shame into one of strength. Not because life got easier, but because they got rooted. The world may not notice. But you will. And those closest to you will feel it, in your presence, your patience, your peace. There's a different kind of power that flows from within. It's not loud or forceful. It doesn't strive to be seen. It doesn't need validation to feel secure. It's steady. Grounded. Deep. And it changes the atmosphere wherever it goes. This is how inner winds become outer change. Not by manipulating circumstances, but by meeting them with clarity. Not by controlling others, but by mastering your own response. Not by escaping discomfort, but by learning to breathe through it. And suddenly, the things that used to unravel you, don't. You find joy in smaller places. You hold space for nuance. You carry a wisdom that doesn't need to be explained, only lived. That's the fruit of this journey. It's not a perfect life. It's a present one. A life anchored, aware, and aligned. The outer world may never fully cooperate. It will offer chaos, noise, uncertainty. But now, you carry something stronger inside. A steadiness built not in a moment, but across moments. A truth tested and tended. A quiet confidence that can't be shaken because it was never borrowed from the outside in the first place. And that's what it means when the inner world wins. You don't have to prove anything. You embody it. Not with words, but with presence. Not with force, but with rooted peace. Not with perfection, but with the daily decision to return, again and again, to what's real. So keep tending your soil. Keep honoring the unseen. Keep choosing truth when lies feel louder. Because every quiet wind becomes a seed. And eventually, seeds become a life. One that reflects not just the world around you, but the world within you. Inner winds often go unnoticed but create lasting external change. A peaceful, grounded life grows from consistent internal choices. Transformation is embodied through presence, not perfection. What quiet inner shift are you most proud of, and how is it changing your outer world? Mark one inner wind today, a thought, a reaction, a choice, and honor it. Let it remind you of how far you've come. Take care and be well.